Have you ever had a piece of aluminum and you're wondering if it was fixable or how to even make a new part to replace it? Hey there, Daniel Hartman, Community Machinery, Sackville, New Brunswick, just had the perfect job come in to share some of the finer points about aluminum fabricating. Now, the part in question is a vacuum seater, and this piece on the edge here made up a new piece. I'll show you the original, was this light gauge material here, and you can see the way it's painted on the back. It's like a household flashing material that's not even really designed for fabricating with. So it's not the ideal material for welding. On the back you can see there's some silicone and lots of dirt. Now if we were going to weld this, we'd make sure we'd remove that silicone and that paint. Aluminum, particularly, is a very porous material, and when there's dirt, it's a lot different than mild steel, which is a really common material for welding. That material will not come into the weld joint and really create a lot of porosity, which basically means, well, you might have a weld there cosmetically, structurally, there's no integrity to it. And if you get something like a lot of times aluminum irrigation tubing and different components that need to have a structural integrity, having that cleanliness is a big deal. And I know years ago, everyone used to have dirt bikes around and the chain would come off and it would break the aluminum casing, and over the lifetime it absorbed all this oil, stuff like that. Sometimes I would say it's not even weldable it's not practical to weld. A lot of times people put all kinds of different parts together and it could work. It's one of those things, not the best use of resources if it can be avoided. So for this project, instead of using this really light gauge material, for me and where I'm at with my welding, I would say I usually like welding stuff that's 1/8 of an inch and up for aluminum, as far as it can be really tough to weld this lighter gauge material and have the joint design so it holds together well. Aluminum, it can be brittle. It doesn't have a whole lot of elongation, I would say, for the sake of how we're talking about it here. And get a little bit of corrosion and then it'll break beside the weld just like that. And something like this, because it can flex a lot more than a heavier piece, it's like the odds are stacked that the weld is going to break. So anytime doing a piece of aluminum like this, it's important. Well, you can see this has a piece where it's formed on the edge here. A lot of times if you buy flat bar aluminum and any kind of aluminum tubing, it's what's known as 6061, usually T6, there's different toughness. Anyway, we don't need to get in that a whole lot, but flat sheet aluminum is usually what's known as a 3000 series, which is formable if it's cold. If you have 6000 series aluminum, you're going to notice a lot of times if you try to bend something like that, because there's a really distinct grain in aluminum, that it'll just end up cracking if you try to form that without heating it. And aluminum is one of those things where you need something to either indicate how hot it is or just be used to the material to know, because there's no indication of color change when it's getting to that point where it's malleable. So those are a couple little nuances if you're trying to make a part to replace something, or you have an idea of a design and you're trying to build something. So let me just pick this thing up. So you can see here where we added this on. The other thing with having this stuff clean, you can see right in here, it's got a dark spot. Now that was an old weld there, and some of that stuff wicked out. I made a point of scraping all the silicone off, sanding, and soap and water. If you're taking your aluminum out to get someone to weld, a lot of times welding shops, it's not always, the most finesse environment. So sometimes people don't know to take the time to clean stuff up. So if you're getting aluminum welded, clean the stuff yourself beforehand. You can save some money as well in terms of shop time. Soap and water is a good start. Acetone is a common thing I've seen to clean aluminum. I don't know all the technicalities as far as what the best thing is, or environmentally what the best thing is. You know, if you're trying to weld aluminum yourself, and now in a day and age where a lot of welding machines, especially MIG welders, come standard with a spool gun, which the reason for the spool gun is because aluminum is a soft material. You can't feed it for a long distance through a gun the same way as you would with steel wire. So now that these spool guns are really popular, a lot of people have the capability of welding aluminum at home, on the farm, wherever it is. So there's a couple things you want to keep in mind as far as how you go about your aluminum welding jobs, as far as cleaning it up. And ventilation, big deal, as far as having the right kind of ventilation. You don't want to just have a fan blowing, because you blow away your shielding gas and create a lot of porosity. So the thing to do is to have some kind of a really good fume extractor, or to have somewhere where it's a large enough space and keep your face out of the fumes as much as possible. You can also get a respirator, and a lot of them have pancake filters that will fit under a welding shield, but even better yet, there's some tubes you can get. I know North makes a kit to add so you can have the cartridge intake behind your head, which is a really cool feature that doesn't cost a whole lot. I mean, maybe it's another $50, $60, under $100, I think, for that tube kit, which really gets the intake air out of where the fumes often are if you're down. I know me, where my eyesight is, a lot of times I'll have my head right in the welding fumes, which is not a good thing. These days we've got a fume extractor. We've got a couple different fume extractors here, which are really helpful. Highly advised. But that's a great investment if you're doing a lot of welding. Now, the other thing is thermal transfer in aluminum. So if you're trying to weld a little part, generally this whole part is going to heat up by the time you get that puddle molten. So making sure if you have anything on that surface, like oil, just clean your whole part down and get rid of that. And also, if you have anything, there was a little surprise that I never even thought to take this apart. There was a gasket under here, and some of that gasket melted. So just make sure when someone brings you a part, or if you're bringing in a part like this vacuum seating tray, you don't need to bring in the whole thing. Just bring in the part that needs to be welded. That's sometimes a good thing, especially if someone takes it apart to weld a certain separate part and then loses parts of what you've brought in, finer points. And let's see. Wow, I think that was all the points I was thinking about off the top of my head. So there's the other thing I'll touch on just briefly. So there's two common types of ways to weld aluminum. Basically MIG welding, which we were talking about with the spool gun. And then there's also Tig welding, which is a lot more precise, but it takes a lot more dexterity because one hand is holding basically a torch that's creating an arc, and then the other hand is used to add filler metal. And there's all kinds of different things that can be done with TIG welding that would be much tougher to do, as far as you wouldn't weld anything light gauge with a MIG welder the same as you would with a TIG welder. And the other thing with MIG welders, you can also get a push-pull gun, which is like a train with a locomotive at the front and at the back, because aluminum, as we talked about earlier, that wire is soft. And it's funny how things like wire is soft, but at the same time, it's also brittle. So there's some interesting quirks with aluminum, which is nice in fabricating sometimes, especially if you've seen people do things like soffit and fascia, where a lot of times you can score with a knife and then bend it back and forth a couple times and cut your pieces. And the other thing with aluminum fabrication, you can use a lot of your woodworking tools. Now, it's not recommended to just use a regular woodworking carbide blade, although it will cut the material. I would say from a safety standpoint, it's probably not advisable as far as the stuff's not designed that way. But by all means, things like table saws and miter saws are great for cutting up aluminum material if you're going to fabricate something out of aluminum. And there's all kinds of really great extrusions you can get for aluminum, which make projects so nice if there's a lot of details to them. So those are some of the brief thoughts on aluminum. I'll try and get some more content together as far as aluminum as time goes on and different projects come in. But those are just a few of the basics. And if you found this helpful, please like and please subscribe for that even better content that's coming out, and also post comments below as far as what you might find helpful and what kind of videos we could do next that would provide even better value. Thanks so much. Have a great day.